Okay, good morning, everybody. We are going to get started. To begin with, the usual health and safety announcement. There's no fire alarm drill anticipated today, so in the event of a fire alarm sounding, please leave the building through the nearest fire exit and by following the green running man signs above the doors, and make your way to the rear of the car park. If anybody needs assistance leaving the building in the event of an emergency evacuation, please let us know. The organiser of the meeting will then tell you when it is safe to return. Please also make sure all phones are either muted or switched off. To start the meeting proper then, good morning everybody and welcome to this Strategic Planning Committee meeting on Tuesday the 6th of January 2026 and Happy New Year, colleagues. I'm your chair, Councillor Todd Olive. To my right is Vice Chair Councillor Mike Howe. Supporting officers present today are Ed Freeman, Assistant Director, Planning Strategy and Development Services, Damien Hunter, Planning Solicitor, and Wendy Harris, Democratic Services Officer. Could I remind everyone, please, that this meeting is recorded for publication on the Council's website, so please can members and officers making a contribution to the meeting use a microphone or your comments will not be recorded. Before we begin the rest of the meeting, I'd like to express our thanks to Councillor Del Haggerty, who resigned from the authority late last year, but before that was a member of this committee, and Councillor Colin Brown, both for their service on this committee, and extend a welcome to Councillors Fitzgerald and Faithful, who I see are both not here today, but we welcome them in their absence anyway. We'll now start the meeting proper then by doing a roll call of committee members and declarations of interests, please, Wendy.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with yourself, Councillor Olive.
Present and no declarations at this time, thank you.
Councillor Howe, Vice Chair.
Present and no declarations.
Councillor Brian Bailey.
Good morning, Wendy. Present, no declarations.
Councillor Jess Bailey.
Present, no declarations. Thank you.
Councillor Blakey.
Present and no declarations. Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Present, no declarations.
Thank you. Hopefully Councillor Faithful will arrive shortly because he normally catches the bus. So, Councillor Fernley, no. Councillor Fitzgerald, no. Councillor Hayward, no. Councillor Ingham.
Present, no declarations. And you're right. I got a message from Peter Faithful. He was hoping to get a lift, which I just read. So, unfortunately, that didn't happen.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Present and apologies from Councillor Paula Ferney.
Thank you. Did you say no declarations? Thank you. No Councillor Ledger. Councillor Parr.
Present, no declarations.
Thank you. So the non-committee members, do you have any declarations for this meeting? No? Okay, lovely. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, it looks like I'm going to have to hold the button down on my microphone when I want to speak then. Councillor Young, do you have apologies to offer from someone?
Yeah, I've just had a WhatsApp from Councillor Fitzgerald. She's on a diversion route at the moment, but she'll be with us shortly.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Young. In view of the fact that one of the public speakers this morning has indicated that they'd like to comment on the outcome in the minutes of the meeting in November, which we would otherwise have considered at agenda item 1 before public speaking, I'm going to bring public speaking forward, and we will do that item first before we move on to the remainder of the agenda. Without any further ado then, agenda item 4, public speaking, and first up please Mr. Shillitoe. Jeff, your microphone.
Yeah, okay. So, as confirmed by Mr. Freeman, you have a plan that's not sound and legally compliant out for Reg 19 consultation again. Assuming you do not want to make changes that may be considered significant, and will send it to the inspector in this form, you risk triggering the next big issue, which was noted in 2.12 of September 2nd SPC report, stating that if the inspector is required to make significant changes to the plan simply fails its examination and cannot be adopted. I say again, if inspectors need to make substantive changes to a plan during examination, it renders it significantly different from the submitted version, therefore violating Reg 19 rules, leading to the plan's failure at examination and preventing its adoption. You're playing a dangerous game, as the rigmarole of the inspector trying to rectify the plan is a merry-go-round of consultations. I urge you to make some tweaks now, while you still have some powers to do so, to get the plan in a form you do believe is sound and legally compliant. This should be your absolute priority, as the Inspectorate's November legislative update is for the Inspector to consider and focus only on this. With regards to the multiple issues with XMO 20's soundness and legal compliance, not least that its very inclusion is based on the field evidence and fraudulent document mentioned previously, I strongly suggest you utilise the spare 563 housing allocations confirmed by Mr Freeman as not required to remove the troublesome upper half of the site. There's a pathway now. Please do not be too stubborn to take it. Remember, the LPA should rigorously assess the plan before it is published to ensure that, in your view, it is sound and meets the necessary legal requirements. This approach may raise uncomfortable questions, but the purpose of preparing a plan is to address all the necessary matters and not rely on the inspector to attempt to fix deficient plans at examination. In December, I pointed out an error with the plan not aligning with the SPC agreed sustainability appraisal evidence, which states no built development in the top 400 metres of XMO 20, but not written in the plan. Someone noticed a similar misalignment with an evidence decision for Wimpole 08, yet they managed to get the Reg 19 plan withdrawn, amended and republished during the consultation. Amending the plan on December 11th in the middle of the consultation. Inconsistent and procedurally flawed. I'm not wanting some lame excuse today. That's another one on the list for the inspector. A long list. And councillors, this plan is being developed in your names. With every vote, you become complicit in this questionable behaviour. So I suggest that you state any concerns or caveat your decisions, as there's a lot of documents that go through this committee that, alas, you can't read in full, and therefore put considerable blind faith in others in putting your name to them. Your integrity is potentially being undermined. Do not waste this 563 house lifeline you have been given. Thank you and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Mr Shillito. Mr Hamill.
You'll be disappointed to hear that this morning I am not going to be talking directly to EXMO 20, but only because it isn't on the agenda. You know why I'm really here, though. Instead, I am raising my serious concerns about the failures in process within this local plan, particularly the way decisions appear to have been made. This undermines the credibility, legality, and soundness of the plan. Prime examples of the failures are the continued lack of a complete air quality mitigation strategy, the inherent conflicts contained in the HRA, and the site selection methodology. You will all remember that this had to be changed in December 2024 to retrospectively accommodate failed HELAR sites. At Regulation 19 stage, the local plan is supposed to be justified, evidence-led, and consistent. And what we are seeing is evidence that is being shaped to fit predetermined outcomes. The proper sequence is evidence first, assessment second, decisions last. But what we have is a decision has been made, the plan has been amended, and the evidence selectively relied upon to justify that amendment. This is not plan making, it is outcome-driven planning. And this approach raises several fundamental problems. Firstly, procedural failure. If changes are to be made, they should be transparently consulted upon with clear explanation of why the earlier version was no longer valid. Second problem is soundness, as the plan cannot be justified if policies are altered or sites are amended without a demonstrable evidence-based need, and the need must be consistently applied across all alternatives. Thirdly, and in my view most importantly, public trust. When communities see decisions altered to specific sites after the fact, confidence in your local plan is damaged. It creates the perception, whether you intend it or not, that decisions are being driven by developer pressure rather than by planning principles and by us, your residents. And fourthly and lastly, legal risk. A local plan that appears to retro-write decisions is vulnerable at examination. Inspectors demand a clear audit trail showing how evidence informed choices, not how choices reshape the evidence. So Regulation 19 is meant to test whether this plan is sound. In its current form, it is not. I therefore urge you, the committee, acknowledge these failings in process. Have the courage to write them now before the inspector rejects the whole plan. And you, councillors, this I think will be your legacy. And again, I urge you, get the process right now before the inspector marks your work. Let's not forget, evidence first, assessment second, resulting in good decisions.
Happy New Year, Mr. Hamill. Thank you. Mr. Humphrey.
I will be again focusing on the Council's commitment to public engagement and have 3 points to make. Point 1. Following the completion of the first consultation, we were told that we would not receive one-to-one responses to our comments. However, I have checked the updated Sustainability Appraisal Report and I found a whole new section, over 30 pages, which details the Council's responses to all of the comments received on this report in the first consultation. Surely the people that raised these comments should have been made aware of the Council's responses. The onus should not be on the public to search every document just in case the Council have responded. Point 2, turning to previous attempts at effective engagement with this committee, I asked some specific questions at the last SPC meeting. However, no suitable responses were given, and I will not waste time repeating them today. However, I would like to note that I sent an email to Councillor Olive at the beginning of December 2025 asking these questions again and including an additional question which I copied to all councillors on this committee. As of today, I have not had one response. The additional question I asked in the email relates to the second consultation, and it was, what publicity and communications has been provided to the public in relation to the second consultation? If members of the public sign up to the Commonplace and the Council newsletter, they may have been informed. But how many of the public do this? Search social media and online specifically for the second Regulation 19 consultation, and you may see a post dated the 28th of November, or one from Councillor Faithful, or even one for the Exmouth Journal dated the 1st of December. But again, who does this? And should the public have to search for this information? Surely there should be more clear and structured processes of engagement in place. Finally, this second consultation was mainly for the new community at Malcolm. As of this morning, Commonplace has 4 comments on the whole chapter. That includes 1 for Malcolm. This committee was told by Mr. Freeman that the 1,100 comments for Exmoor 20 was not unusual for a large development. So what would be the expectation for a new community of 10,000 homes? If only 1 comment so far, what is the Council going to do to proactively engage with the public on this matter? To reiterate, what I am requesting is that when you seek to consult with the public, that EDDC and this committee need to prove that they are genuinely and comprehensively seeking to engage with and listening to the public. Responding to my specific points and questions raised here would be appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Humphrey. Mr. Lees.
Good morning. Happy New Year. Thank you for a warm chamber. My question is a question, not a statement. My question is regarding the strategic planning consultation. I'm a resident in Honiton, and there is real concern amongst local people that the housing plans are going to put great strain on an already overstretched local infrastructure. Obviously, I'm thinking about doctors, surgery, schools, roads, and especially at this time, the recent water report that has revealed major problems with water treatment and pollution in the Otter. Please, can you let us know how you plan to address these issues? Can we have a local, some meetings where actual people can come? Because I think the computer portals and that way of doing it is incredibly unfriendly and hard to access. It's only been in my experience. And is it true that the planning is on hold until South West Water have resolved the many water issues and the Otter is no longer being heavily polluted? And I quote from a letter from to me from a councillor on the Honiton Town Council. EDCC Strategic Planning Committee Chair confirms Council will reject further planning proposals in Honiton region until South West Water delivers adequate treatment capacity. What's that going to look like, and how can we be certain that is held to? Because as been commented on before, is they're putting more weight on this bridge, and at some point it's going to break. And simply building houses is not the answer to a really fundamental problem to do with what the town can actually cope with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lees. Mr. Whiteley, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me to speak today at short notice. I'm indebted to Love National Landscapes, WhatsApp and Facebook page for bringing this item to my attention, along with Mr. Gerard of Devon Live. I'm talking on with respect to item 9, Torbay Local Plan. I've been asking the committee to accept the premise that the standard method does not apply to East Devon due to the presence of national landscapes. The committee has refused to address the issue, but it now recognises it. We now have a farcical situation where EDDC is being cajoled into accepting the difference between Torbay's standard method numbers and their rightly constrained numbers, constrained by the South Devon National Landscape. This is nonsense. The government National Planning Policy Framework standard method parameters already take into account the effects of national landscapes. So if all the districts follow EDDC's logics, then the government will build too many houses with the associated housing price crash. More importantly, EDDC will become attracted to populace of other neighbouring districts with movement of populace. Both EDDC and the donating districts' housing markets will fail, leaving the most needy in negative equity. The National Planning Policy Framework calls for the minimum number. This committee seems to be trying to maximise the numbers. Furthermore, this report questions the statistical validity of Torbay's new figures. But EDDC has admitted it does not have any statisticians who could comment. We know this because EDDC has not had their housing report reviewed by a qualified person. Finally, EDDC officers say that the Torbay is not unique. This is irrelevant. EDDC is 8th in the ranking of 288 authorities, i.e. 1 in 40. To be exceptional, it only requires to be 1 in 20. and not unique. The Torbay figures show this can be a significant change in numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whiteley. And lastly, Councillor Collins. I'd prefer to get all the public speaking out of the way and then have Mr. Freeman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to speak about trees, woodland and forests versus food production. It really doesn't add up. We're planting trees in Britain and cutting back food production to help the environment. Yet we are importing food from countries where forests are being cut down to grow that food. If climate change is a global issue, this makes no sense. Producing food here under higher environmental and animal standards is often far less damaging than clearing rainforests overseas to meet demand. All we are doing is exporting the damage, not reducing it. A tree planted in the UK doesn't cancel out rainforests destroyed elsewhere. If we are serious about the planet, we should be producing more of our own food, not outsourcing at environmental cost. Looking green isn't the same as being green. Now, in East Devon, you're taking an awful lot of agricultural land for developments. This land is surely needed to produce food. I would like to see this committee seriously looking at sites where you've got agricultural land that you're taking out of production just to build houses or employment lands. This land will always be needed for future generations to produce food. Once you've concreted and tarmacked and built these houses, that land will be gone forever. What are our grandchildren and their children going to live off of? Because there won't be no food abroad, I can assure you that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Mr. Freeman, is there anything in there that you would think it's appropriate to come back to at this time, please?
Thank you, Chair. Well, perhaps a couple of points to pick up on. I mean, in terms of Mr. Shillitoe, Mr. Hamill's comments, obviously they know to make those views through the consultation that's running at the moment, so I won't respond or previously have obviously commented on many of those points through previous meetings. In terms of Mr. Humphrey's point about the consultation, I'd make the point that there is further comms to come. There's still several weeks left of the consultation. We obviously had a bit of a lull over Christmas and New Year, but appreciate further comms to draw attention to that is needed and will take place over the coming weeks. Obviously, the other thing to say on that is the focus of this consultation is on how this version of the plan has addressed comments raised in previous iterations of the plan and previous consultations. So we have, through the contact details that we already have through Commonplace, contacted everyone who's commented previously on the plan and all those that we've previously consulted. So the main audience has already had a direct correspondence from us on the consultation. In terms of Mr. Lee's comments about Honiton, I'd highlight that in terms of meetings and consultation, there have been further consultation. We're at quite a late stage of plan production now. We have been through this. There was public consultation session in Honiton at the Reg 18 stage back in 23, I think it was, which was very well attended from memory, where a lot of these issues around infrastructure were raised and have been taken on board through our work. In terms of South West Water and the water cycle study, then clearly There are policies and comments in the plan about how development, new homes won't be able to come forward until and unless South West Water deliver the infrastructure needed to accept the flows from that. So that is written into the plan to ensure that the system's not overloaded through new development. And finally, just in terms of Mr. Whiteley's comments, I mean, I've had quite a detailed correspondence with Mr. Whiteley about this whole issue about how we're considering the national landscape in terms of the standard method and housing figures. I don't suggest I replicate that today. We don't agree on the issue, but I don't see the contradiction with what we're saying about Torbay, which we'll come on to later. I think the distinct difference is that we are putting forward a plan that does meet the housing need for East Devon, notwithstanding that 58% of the district is national landscape. Torbay are proposing not to meet their standard method need, and so there's a key difference there, I think, in terms of the approach that's being taken, and hence our comments on their plan, which we'll come on to later in the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. The last thing for me to say on that is I'm sorry you haven't had a response yet, Mr. Humphrey. I actually don't remember seeing an email from you, but with that said, if it was in early December, I have not been looking at my emails for most of December and hadn't done until yesterday morning, so I will endeavour to get you a response this week. So apologies you've not had one yet. That then brings us back to the remainder of the agenda for... Oh, sorry, Councillor Ingham, yes.
Just quickly, Chair, the speakers we've heard this morning, most of them, I think, certainly nearly all of them, have spoken before. Sometimes we become immune to what they say to us. I'm thinking especially of Councillor Collins and his advice. We all know, but we choose to park it separately when we consider the emerging East Devon local plan and play it small heed. I just wanted to say to you, ours is not the only vision for East Devon. We're not the only people who think we're doing the right thing. Lots of people think we're doing the wrong things. A constituent of mine recently said, Ben, why aren't you building or planning to build on Woodbury Common? After all, the land there is of no use and no value to future generations. You shouldn't. You're laughing. I hope future generations are able to laugh at choose not to laugh at some of the decisions we're taking now because of our disregard for arable land and its value to the future. Thank you, Chair.
Can we have quiet from the public gallery, please? Thank you. Councillor Bailey, briefly.
Very briefly, Chair. Thank you very much. We've heard all this before, and I'm quite pleased to hear it again. And I'm pleased that you're going to address the remarks from Mr. Humphreys. This is an ongoing vicious circle going on for years. God's not making any more land, so we have to respect the land we have. And I think to follow, I wouldn't say blindly, because we don't follow blindly, but to be in a position where we're cajoled to follow the NPPF in all its wisdom, or lack of, that we should be seriously considering a building embargo. This council did it about 25 years ago when South West Water did the clean sweep. I believe it took about 5 years, but the results are very, very good. And now we're in a situation, a worse situation with South West Water and the infrastructure than 25 years ago, which I remember well, and we're still giving permission to build. And I personally think that is wrong, and I would like yourselves and the committee and the officers to reconsider the fact that we could put the embargo on for all the reasons stated and lots of others. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've seen your hand, Councillor Young. I'm not going to take us round in circles on this because we actually have some substantive items that are actually on the agenda to discuss today. We've talked about what we're doing about South West Water. We talked about it at length late last year, and we have been unequivocal that where the evidence says that there is not capacity for the system and where infrastructure is not forthcoming in time from South West Water, we will not be giving planning permission. It's a moratorium by another name. Councillor Bailey, I understand, believe me, I share the frustrations of everybody in this district with South West Water, but we are actually taking that action. As to a broader moratorium, as to the issue of the MPPF, we have a legal obligation to comply with what government is telling us to do. We've talked in this committee before, I think twice in my term of office, which now feels an awful lot longer than 2.5 years, about not following the requirements set out in the MPPF, about not following the standard method, about refusing to follow those rules that government set out for us, and when the facts are presented to us, when the risks are put in front of us, we have said, no, we're going to follow the rules. Twice, just in my term of office, twice, let alone all of the times that I know this committee have done this before. I get everybody's frustrations, believe me, I share them, but we have this discussion, we go round and round in circles, and it's just, I find it very frustrating. So, you know, I understand where you're coming from, Brian. I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Collins. I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Ingham. But we've had the conversations, we've made the decisions, going round in circles and talking about them over and over again, when the local plan isn't on the agenda at all today, isn't a good use of our time. So I'm going to move us on. Thank you. It's not that I'm not interested. It's not that I don't care. But we've talked about it and we've got other stuff that we need to talk about today. So thank you. I'm going to move us on. Agenda item 2, apologies. I have Councillor Levine written down and I believe we've had Councillor Fernley noted from the floor. Do we have any other apologies?
I've received no other apologies.
No, okay, thank you. So Councillor Fitzgerald and Faithful, do you have any declarations to make?
No declaration from me, thank you.
Have you logged in, Peter? It's behind your iPad. It's behind your iPad.
I'm over there. Yes, I'm a member of Ottery to Mary Town Council, reference item 7. Neighbourhood plans. So, yes, we probably will want some money, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hunter, to draw you out of your reverie, agenda item 7, do town and parish councillors need to declare an interest in it? I had taken the view that I didn't, as I didn't think it met any of the criteria. But as Peter has decided that he does, for the benefit of the many town and parish councillors around these tables.
Well, at this stage, Chair, it really is just whether or not you personally feel that your particular parish or town council has a particular interest in that matter. If it's just, you know, a general interest insofar as it's one of the town councils or parish councils in East Devon, I would suggest not. But if it's a specific interest because, you know, they're landowners or something like that, then it's, you know, potentially an interest that you need to declare. So again, at this stage, I don't know whether it's something that's really, you know, sorry? No, exactly. It's just for noting. So I don't think it's really something that needs to be commented on in view of an interest.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hunter. Do any town and parish councillors with us want to declare an interest at that point? No, okay. Councillor Bailey?
Yes, I declare I'm a member of Exeter Town Council, and also I was one of the many people that wrote many years ago the original neighbourhood plan for Exeter. So I'd like to declare that I was involved in that.
Okay.
Just for clarity's sake.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Unless anybody else feels a burning need, I'm going to move us on. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ingham.
Chair, I think Mr. Hunter's made it quite clear. If we all have to declare or choose to declare an interest so that on something that may affect our council, yeah, we're going to have to declare an interest on practically every item. The thing is, have you personally a financial interest in that? Are you investing in that, as explained, Mr. Hunter?
We've had Mr. Hunter's advice, and it's for folks to make their own decision. I'm not going to labour the point, Councillor Ingham.
Yeah, I'm supporting it. Let's not waste time. That's what I'm saying.
Respectfully, Councillor Ingham. Okay, are there any? We've done apologies, we've done declarations of interest, we've now done public speaking. There are no matters of urgency under agenda item 5 and no confidential or exempt items under agenda item 6. Is everything all right on the end of the table? Oh, Brian's just silencing his phone. Okay, in which case then, agenda item 7, please, the future of neighbourhood planning support. Mr. Freeman.
My apologies, Chair.
That's right, we haven't done the minutes yet, thank you. I postponed them and then forgot about them. Very good. Does anybody have any comments, please, on the minutes of the previous meeting on the 25th of November? No, in which case then, as chair, I'll move those minutes as a true and accurate record. Members, please raise your hand if you're in favour. Any against, please? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. I think that's clearly carried, which brings us actually this time to agenda item 7, please, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. So this report seeks to provide members with an update on work on neighbourhood planning in the district and some future issues, particularly around the support that we provide for neighbourhood planning and funding that's available. Members may have seen that government financial support that was going direct to the communities to support plan making work has been ended as part of the funding review. So this had provided grants of up to £10,000 per neighbourhood planning group, which was often being tapped into and used by our communities to fund professional support for that work, reports such as habitat regulations assessments, etc., that require technical input that the communities won't necessarily have in-house. And has been particularly important for a number of our communities given the landscape and environmental sensitivities of many areas of the district. So it's quite regrettable that the governments have withdrawn that funding, and that obviously has knock-on implications for our neighbourhood planning groups in terms of their ability to progress neighbourhood plans in the absence of that funding. Despite that, government remain committed to neighbourhood planning, and obviously funding does still remain to support the examinations process, which is the funding that comes largely to ourselves to fund the examination process. And over the years, this has helped us to build up a bit of a reserve, which has helped to pay for the officer support that we've had to support neighbourhood planning work in the district. So that's largely made the neighbourhood planning work self-funding in effect through that process. But obviously, with that withdrawal of that wider government funding and also a slowdown in the number of plans coming through to us, which I think is partly because of where we are in terms of the local plan process, in that there's this need for plans to be in general conformity with the local plan. So obviously with us progressing a new local plan, we think some groups have been holding off waiting for the new local plan to progress so that they're in general conformity with that rather than the outgoing local plan, as it were. Which also has a benefit in terms of decision making in the future, because the most up-to-date plan will ultimately carry greater weight in that process. So I think that's been a factor. I think there are other factors around changes in government policy and uncertainty in recent times as well. But ultimately, the number of plans coming through has slowed down, which has meant that we've not had so many getting through the examination process, so we haven't received as much money coming in that we receive at that stage from government. So that does mean in the next financial year, we're planning the budget on the basis that the support we provide for neighbourhood planning will have an impact on the core funding of the council, probably for the first time, to the extent of about £36,000. In that financial year. So that's just to make members aware of that impact on the wider budget. We do as officers, however, feel that the support that we provide for neighbourhood planning is invaluable in terms of the work that's going on in the district. There's fantastic work being done by neighbourhood planning groups across the district, and we do want to continue to support that work and provide them with not just the statutory support that we're required to provide to the examination process, but also the support to be able to attend their meetings, advise them through the process, and also do work to encourage and support them through that work. So as I say, there's been this depletion in activity, which is unfortunate, but I think with the plan having now reached the stage of work that it has, with the intention of submitting the plan for examination later this year, there's now an opportunity to reinvigorate some of that work in the district, and we're looking at launching an event to invite in the neighbour planning groups and try and support them as best we can in terms of moving forward with plans that can align with the emerging local plan moving forwards. So aside from those issues around funding and future support, we also wanted to highlight much of the great work that's been going on in the district in terms of neighbour plan work in recent years. And you'll see the report refers to some of the additional housing allocations that have come forward, the support for self-build housing that's come forward in plans, the additional employment and community developments that have been brought forward or in the process of being brought forward, as well as the more protectionist policies that have come forward, plans around protecting green spaces, green infrastructure, and the all-important stronger voice that this work is being given to our communities in decision-making on planning matters that affect them. So it's been a really important work, I think, and really value the contributions that all of the neighbour planning groups have made through the work that they've been doing. As I say, it's unfortunate that the funding situation is as it is. We have looked at opportunities to provide further support ourselves, but the council really isn't in a financial position to be able to do that, unfortunately. However, we have looked at what others have been doing, and you'll see that set out in the report, and there is an opportunity for some use of the neighbourhood proportion of SIL to help support plan making, because that can ultimately lead to infrastructure needs being identified and an avenue for those to be brought forward. So we think that's an opportunity for some of our communities, at least, where they've had development and had a neighbourhood proportion of SIL. And that's one of the issues we're keen to talk to them about in terms of the event I mentioned. So as I say, there will be this impact on the general fund moving forward. So members are asked to note the changed context for neighbour planning, particularly the funding issues. It's recommended that the chair write to MHCLG to formally register the council's disappointment with that decision in terms of funding and urge them to reconsider and or look at alternative funding options for neighbour planning. And we can, through that letter, I think, highlight the good work that's gone on in East Devon and the impact that that's had in terms of the delivery of homes and community facilities and the benefits for planning in the district. Committee are also asked to note the impact of maintaining our current resourcing and neighbourhood planning work on the general fund. As I've mentioned, that amounts to about £36,000, we think, in the next financial year as an impact on the general fund. But we think that is important work that needs to continue. The other recommendation relates to an annual report. Through producing this report, I think we've identified that we perhaps haven't kept strategic planning committees engaged in neighbourhood planning work. Members will be aware that the plans themselves, in terms of the council's comments and taking them through to referendum, are all decisions that are made by cabinet. But obviously, neighbourhood plans, when they do come through and are made, form part of the development plan, which is ultimately the auspice of this committee. So we feel it's important that we do more in future to keep the committee appraised of progress in terms of neighbourhood planning work, and propose bringing in an annual report to you to set out the work that's been done in that year and the progress that's been made. So I'd make those recommendations to the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Questions, please. I see a flood from the floor. Ollie, I saw your hand first. Have you put it down because you didn't have a question?
No, I do have a question.
Then the floor is yours.
Although I will preface that by saying thank you, Ed. I thought this was a very well written and very clear report. Some good detail in it, some good examples of where neighbourhood plans had proved useful in enabling communication with communities over housing allocations. I think particularly Cliff St Mary, although Mike might disagree with me on that one. I think it's very disappointing the government has done this, and it seems like penny pinching compared to the the kind of budget constraints they're facing. I particularly welcome the idea of templates, models and so on, policies. And I just wondered how councils will be enabled to share resources as suggested in that section, sharing resources and good practice, because I think peer support can be very useful when councils are going through that process. And I wasn't part of the Exmouth Neighbourhood Plan Group last time, so I wasn't a councillor, but I know that it was hard work, and I think Brian will attest to that. I think I did go to a meeting.
Took us 2 years on it.
Yeah, and I think that's actually pretty nippy. So I think that the withdrawal of this funding is regrettable, but I do like the idea of peer support, always welcome that. And I just wondered what the mechanism is and how can we ensure that that is really enabled and is effective.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. We're at 8.5 years and counting in Wimple. Councillor Brian Bailey.
Well, first of all, I wish you well, Chair. That seems a long time. It really does. But that's probably is the point, beside the point. My question is, whether I missed it in the report, I don't think I did. We made our neighbourhood plan many, many years ago, and it's in need of revision. Now, Mr. Freeman, will there be any officer help when we do our revision, or will there not be? I understand the financial constraints, but I'm thinking of officers' time that could be available if we needed it. Thank you.
Coming down the line, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Yes, thank you. Just a question about the amounts that we should be talking to our parishes about setting aside should they want to update their neighbourhood plans. The figure of £10,000 having been allocated to parishes previously for the creation of neighbourhood plans for some of the smaller parishes might be A, difficult to raise, and B, might be too much. So when we're having conversations with parishes about setting aside future funds, is there some guidance you can give us on that, or maybe they could reach out to East Devon for guidance on that? Thank you.
And I don't remember seeing a hand from Councillor Faithful, but I'm going to check. No? Okay, in which case we'll come to Mr. Freeman for those on the right of the chamber first before we do the other half.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, so coming back to Councillor Davies' point, I mean, so there's peer support in two senses at the moment. I think there's a group of district level councils that have a forum that meets, that Angela, our neighbour planning officer, sits on, so she gets some support and guidance from across the wider sort of southwest and nationally. And then we've had a series of webinars that we've done where we've invited all of the neighbour planning groups and also the 10 parishes that aren't actively pursuing neighbour plans so that they can be in the room and understand what's going on. We're keen to reinvigorate that and do more of those. I think in recent times they focus perhaps more on the local plan work that we've been doing and sort of communicating with them about that because of the obvious impact that that has on neighbour planning work. But we're keen to continue that and do more of those, but also do some more in-person events because I think it's important to have that face-to-face interaction and also to get people in the room whereby people from different communities can interact more with each other as well, and we're in a prime position to sort of facilitate that. So I think that's part of an event that is referred to in there that we're looking at setting up in the next couple of months, but also having a series of those going forward, both online and in person, to enable that kind of peer support and learning from each other's experiences, because I think that's really important. In terms of Councillor Bailey's point, yes, I mean, as the report says, we're looking to maintain the level of support that we currently provide. So there is a dedicated officer, Angela King, who's our dedicated neighbourhood planning officer. I'm sure will be happy to meet with representatives from Exmouth Neighbourhood Planning Group if they want to look at revising the neighbourhood plan. And there are other members of the team that chip in on particular specialist areas and things as well. So you know, the purpose of the report is to sort of set out the issues, but fundamentally we want to maintain the current level of support for as long as we can. So look for members' support and the committee's support in doing that, despite the budget implications that will now have. Turning to Councillor Fitzgerald's point, I think in terms of how much money to set aside for the Enabler Plan, it partly depends on sort of the size of the community and the issues within that community, but also what the community wants to achieve with that neighbourhood plan. For example, if they're looking to make an allocation, that will have significant implications for how much it will cost in terms of the technical reports and things that will need to be produced, versus if it's perhaps less proactive, shall we say, in terms of what the plan wants to achieve, in which case the costs would be less. So it's probably worth a conversation again with Angela in terms of what the community wants to achieve, and then we can probably give a rough indication as to what the likely sort of reports are needed once it's been scoped out. But I think one thing we would say in terms of general advice to neighbourhood planning groups is what we've seen so far is a tendency for plans to try and produce a sort of local plan for their community and cover the whole range of planning issues that we cover in the local plan. And I think one of the messages we want to get out is that's not necessary. They're welcome to do that if that's what they want to do, but they're probably taking on more than they need to, shall we say, in that if there are particular local issues where they want to add to the local plan rather than necessarily duplicate things that are in the local plan, then that can help to narrow the scope and therefore reduce the cost of the work that's involved and the time that it takes people to do it, but still achieve the community's aspirations from neighbourhood plan if there are particular issues that they want at a local level to address. So I think that's quite an important piece of work at the outset, is to do that scoping exercise to understand what people actually want to achieve, what are the priorities for the community. And then we'd be in a position to give a steer in terms of how much that's likely to cost and the implications of that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Coming down the other side, could I have hands again, please, as I've forgotten who wanted to ask a question. Okay, Councillor Young, then Councillor Ingham, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a great report, but disappointing news that we're going to be losing this funding. We do really well on neighbourhood plans in East Devon, and that is a lot of thanks to Angela King, who does a fantastic job. I'm wondering that seeing that we're going to be bringing the parishes together on suggested meetings sometime in the future, that which is really good, would it be appropriate to add another recommendation to inform the parishes of this forthcoming withdrawal of funding from government, and so they could start to plan for putting some money aside or increasing their precept, because we can't, but they can. And also, when we're looking to the future, we're going into unitary councils, and in the end, there's going to be probably a Devon-wide plan and no district plans. Therefore, there's going to be a sort of a whole, and neighbourhood plans might become more important. Therefore, we need to be now I believe we are already talking to some of the councils that would be unified with shortly, but a joint effort into bringing up all the experience that we've gained and now from other councils, so we can go into the future with better plans for neighbourhood plans, so to speak, in the future. But no, we're looking. No, we need to look at years ahead. But I think we need to inform the parish councils of the problems coming up, and also see if we can provide some assistance with when we go into a unitary council as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. I think I detected a question or two in there. Worth highlighting that the funding has already gone. So it was I don't think it ever came back actually for this financial year. Certainly, it's been the case that there hasn't been any funded support this financial year at all since. I think they made the announcement in July before the summer, something like that. But it has been a good half a year already that there's been no funded support available. I know I was waiting to put an application in for some. Councillor Ingham.
Thank you, Chair. I look forward to the debate when I will prattle on, as others do, and myself. But the question, I like the recommendations. I will be supporting them. But my questions regarding recommendation 1, it's a bit weak in my opinion, to be blunt. Line 4, disappointment is too weak, and the word urge. Can we beef those up, please, Mr. Freeman, so we make it, without being impertinent or bloody-minded, well, not too bloody-minded, let the government know that we're a bit more than disappointed, and we don't want to urge them, we want to almost tell them to reconsider what they're doing. Do you see what I'm getting at? Because that's so polite, I suspect they may dismiss it. Thank you, Chair.
Rest assured, as the person who would be sending that letter, it would not be a polite one as it is, but perhaps in Mr. Freeman's view, the recommendation needed to be a bit more diplomatic. But Mr. Freeman, some answers there for you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, yeah, if I start there, I mean, obviously, as officers, we've made a professional recommendation to the committee. If members want to beef that up and be more political, I suppose, in how they send that letter, then that's up to you. I'll leave that to members to suggest that.
I'd love to tell you the words, but I tried and I couldn't think without being. So, can you
and if we go back to Councillor Young's point, I mean, we have told the communities that the money's been withdrawn. We had a webinar in mid-December, I think it was, and yeah, so that we have at the webinars that I mentioned with the communities highlighted that. I think Angela sent an email around to them when it first happened as well. So there has been a lot of communication about all of that. Unfortunately, we weren't in a position to bring this report to the committee until now, because obviously committee time was being taken up with local plan work before now. And I certainly agree with Councillor Young in terms of the increased role of neighbourhood planning moving forwards. I think obviously we're seeing a more of a sort of move to more centralisation, I suppose, with unitary coming in, the combined county authority will be producing a strategic plan, which will obviously be high level. Then any plan over a unitary geography will inevitably be higher level than our local plan and the neighbourhood plans that sit beneath that. So it's clearly important that we're providing that support ongoing to neighbourhood plans moving forwards. I mean, our local plan, I think, is some 300 pages long. I doubt that a plan done on the unitary geography is going to commit 300 pages to East Devon. So all the more important that our neighbourhood plans fill in any gaps that are left. And I'm keen that we support them in doing that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. In which case then, in Councillor Ingham's words, time for us to do the prattling on bit. Councillor Jess Bailey.
Thank you. I'm going to try not to prattle on. Thank you very much for the report, and I really am pleased that we're going to be providing peer support. I think we should be proud of all our neighbourhood plans across the district. We've got loads and they make a real difference, and they also really empower communities to have a say in planning, which is often highly controversial, as we know. But what I do disagree with, I think we should be trying to help continue to fund. The government, yet another terrible decision amongst many, may step away from funding neighbourhood plans, but I don't see why we shouldn't, and I understand the budgetary constraints. We don't necessarily have to fund 10,000 per community, but we could, for instance, fund 8,000, because actually what we're doing is making it really unaffordable for communities, because there's the cost of commissioning expert advice, and some of the assessments. And communities, particularly smaller parishes, won't be able to afford to do it because some of them have precepts of less than £10,000 a year, and many would have less than £20,000 a year. So I think, bearing in mind the budget of East Devon District Council, bearing in mind the importance of neighbourhood plans, we should be trying to do more than just provide peer support. And I think that we should be providing financial support to help communities. I think it makes a real difference. And I think in the grand scheme of things, we're not talking about a massive amount. We're not talking about hundreds coming through each year. We're talking about a really quite a small number. So I would support a change and a further recommendation that we actually actively continue, we step in where the government is failing and continue to support our communities, particularly our small rural communities, which have low precepts. So I don't see why we can't look at doing that. So I'd like to add a recommendation that we provide financial support where the government is stepping away. Thank you.
Perhaps I could ask you to draft some wording while we go around some other speakers, please, Councillor Bailey. Thank you. I have Councillor Ingham. You're prattling next, please.
Yes, thank you. Chair, I want to drag you back to 2012 when the Localism Act brought this in and how refreshing it was when that coalition government decided that the little people were important. So important that the first time in over 1,000 years, it wasn't just landowners, and forgive me, city planners in the last 2 centuries, that were able to consider the growth and expansion of major settlements and small ones, but actually we could, in our small village communities and town communities, could actually engage and influence that. And that was the whole point of the Localism Act. And that's where neighbourhood plans very quickly became rather popular. And as we heard, some villages went at a rapid rate of knots. And I know the first village that embarked on that, only just finished theirs. So they appeared at different rates. But what I am concerned about is, and that's going back to our public speakers, are we really listening? Are we taking on those voices? It's essential that we do, through neighbourhood plans, support them and not just say, you will comply to our local plans, but to double check ourselves and say, do our local plans over the next few decades, do they embrace the aspirations expressed through neighbourhood plans? And we should make sure that they do. So I really do commend what our officers have put forward as recommendations, and we must support that. But I just ask you to be mindful, what is the point of a neighbourhood plan if it's not implemented? What is the point of a local plan if it doesn't embrace the wants and needs of our communities? We should be mindful of both those. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ingham. I have Councillor Blakey, then Brian Bailey, then Young, then Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. It was mentioned during the question section that this might be penny pinching on the part of central government. I don't believe that, because the amount of money involved, I think, is so trivial when set against the national budget. It's neither here nor there. I believe that what this is about is the suppression of local influence on planning policy. I think it is part of a larger move towards the centralisation of the planning in this country, and I find it utterly reprehensible. The idea that we are going through a period of devolution is becoming increasingly laughable as we discover more as we go on. So, briefly, we are faced with a position where costs for the preparation of local plans that are going to be pushed on to council taxpayers without a doubt at town and parish level, or as Councillor Jess Bailey has suggested, that there be financial support from elsewhere that is to say, this authority, but I wonder where we would actually find that funding from. So I'm absolutely in support of the recommendations as they sit, and we'll wait to see what the amendment looks like. But absolutely, we should not let the local plans, the neighbourhood plans wither on the vine. I think it is a deliberate government move that we should resist absolutely. Thank you.
Somebody else has said it, so I'll pipe up at that point. I tend to agree with you, Kevin. It's not about money. When you see it in the context of what's going on with LGR and the desire to reduce the number of councillors and have us operate at much greater geographical scales, I think it's fundamentally about taking local voices out of planning in a very, very real way, particularly when you consider all of the government's other rhetoric about streamlining the system, making applications happen faster, all of that stuff. 100% agreed with you. Councillor Brian Bailey.
Yeah. I have great respect for the neighbourhood plans. However, going back to the Exmouth neighbourhood plan, we did put in the neighbourhood plan that we didn't want any development in North Exmouth, in Bystock Village, which is one of the oldest walled villages in the country, and unfortunately, all the area of northern Exmouth, which has now come under Exmouth 20.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Brian, but if we were to litigate every planning decision that hasn't necessarily
I'm not wishing to do that.
fully complied with.
I'm just wishing to say that this was in our neighbourhood plan in Exmouth, and it's not been adhered to by this authority.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I've been heavily involved in budget setting for this year, and we are heavily restricted in our funding, and we're having to cut expenditure in places. So although I totally support what Councillor Bailey is suggesting, if someone can tell me where we can find the money from, I would be supporting it. But at the moment, I've been told, no, we can't spend it on this. We haven't got any funding for that. We haven't got any funding for important projects. So on the one hand, yes, I support Councillor Bailey's proposal of providing funds, but where are we going to get that funding from before I could support that? And going back to now the concept of neighbourhood plans, I'm a great supporter of neighbourhood plans. It was my first introduction into local government, and I know a lot of other people have learnt about local government and planning from neighbourhood plans. So in that way, it brings people into the mix of deciding on local issues in their area, and it's a vital part of our work that we need to engage with local communities, and we need local communities to feed back what they want in their areas. So it's vital. So we have to continue with it. How we continue with it and where we're going to get the funding from is the big question.
Tend to agree with you, sadly, Councillor Young. I have Councillors Fitzgerald, then Faithful.
Thank you. I also, in principle, I agree with Councillor Jess Bailey's suggestion, very much so, on the same basis that Councillor Bailey suggested, that a lot of our parishes, for a lot of parishes, £10,000 is an awful lot of money, both in the context of their precepts and also the CIL, the CIL monies that they can expect to get from small developments that are already taking place. But I would just say that there seems to be also a need to educate our own councillors and also our parish and town councillors, but even councillors in this council, about what neighbourhood plans can do and the possibility of allocating sites, the possibilities of community-led development, because this isn't something that we come across every day. It's not something that's particularly typical in our district compared with, for example, North Devon, where there are more successful community-led developments. And it's something that I've been trying to sort of educate myself about since I've joined this council, but there isn't a plethora of information about it. I've just secured a housing needs survey for one of the parishes in my ward. That's been something I've been trying to secure since I joined the council. I think there's one part of it is finding funding, and the other part of it is actually educating councillors on what is the art of the possible and what we would like to see. And we talk about it in this forum. You know, the difference between what we can actually achieve and what we would like to achieve, but how can we go about that? How can we use our position as district councillors to make our parishes aware of the resources available and to facilitate those community-led development groups or groups that might do that? So I would support potentially looking at an envelope for funding. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that we just make it available to every ward, every parish. I think there needs to be a level of onus on them to come forward and ask for it and have a plan as to what they want the money for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. I was just briefly whispering to Mr. Freeman there. I think we'll take those points away for that event that we'll be organising this quarter and look at doing something around best practice, what's the art of the possible, what have other plans in East Devon done? Because we already have all of that knowledge. You know, Angela is a veritable wealth of information about all of the plans that we have. So we'll take that away and pick it up. Councillor Faithful, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from all the comments that have been made by the councillors, the one point of town and parish councils is that they do not have a limit on how much they can adjust their precinct by, which everybody else, Devon County and district councils, we do have a limit. But as it has been said, the amount of change will be quite substantial, bearing in mind not just for this, at Ottery Town, we've got Devon County libraries looking at town funding. We've got East Devon looking at parks and green spaces transferred over, and we need to get our precinct sorted out probably this month to get for next year. So can we please get as much information as quickly as possible, because we've got so many other things we're having to consider in our precinct for next year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Faithful. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. And I think in the letter we could also point out the inconsistency in saying you're supportive of neighbourhood planning while removing the funding, although I take your point, which I hadn't really considered, and Councillor Blakey made it very eloquently as well, about the removal of local voices from planning decisions, and I particularly deplore the presentation of local councils as somehow obstructing the planning process, when actually they're often just an integral part of it and produce better decisions, not necessarily refusals, but much better quality development as a result of the process. I think I do support the principle of attempting to continue to support local parish and town councils in their preparation of, and I think a lot will want to come forward with amended plans. But I think it might be useful, rather than making an open-ended commitment, that we need to maybe come back with another report about how many plans actually might need that funding if we look at how many are in preparation at a given time and the kind of funding support they might need. And then we could work out the cost implications and maybe then find some way of kind of making the case at least that planning requires that kind of budget in order to continue supporting neighbourhood plans. Otherwise, we're just kind of approving the principle, but without any figures or detail to back it up. So I would suggest that was the recommendation, that another report comes back on the cost implications rather than simply saying we support the principle and then trying to think, well, where's the money going to come from?
I think given the timescales, that report would probably have to go to either the overview and scrutiny meeting that's looking at the budget or straight to Cabinet rather than back to here if that was to be the approach. But perhaps Mr Freeman can offer some thoughts if we go down that road. Councillor Howell.
Thank you very much, Chair. And to follow on what others have said, actually, this is a blatant attempt to squash local opinions, I'll say carefully, not necessarily democracy, but it is opinions that are put forward in a structured way that blatantly the government doesn't like and doesn't want to hear about. Following up on numerous other points, yes, parish and town councils can set their own precepts with no limit, so they can up them quite easily. So being careful and mindful of that, I think if we're going to contribute, and I think we should contribute to neighbourhood plans, I'm wary of our budget constraints at the same time, so a lower level would make me a lot happier. You know, it's fairly obvious 27 plans over the last 8 years or so. Even if they all did it again, that's only 27,000 in a year if £1,000 each times by whatever number Councillor Bailey actually puts in. But I do think the local parish or town needs to foot the majority of the bill because it benefits them directly. The issue I've always had with neighbourhood plans is what we as a community, as East Devon, rarely did, and that is they were designed to enable development, not to restrict development. And that is a fundamental issue with nearly all our neighbourhood plans. I was lucky with my Crescent Mary neighbourhood plan, came up at the right time, we pushed it through and got the review done, and it has an allocation for the development that our local plan, our emerging local plan, was proposing for my village. But the residents wanted it in a different location. Simple, nice and easy. And we managed to get that through. So there is that cautionary tale of don't think of neighbourhood plans as a restrictor. You've got to think of it as a neighbour. And Councillor Fitzgerald's point is absolutely spot on. We have for too long in our communities tried to do the wrong thing in the right way, but the wrong thing. And we do need to look at how our communities can take back that control to get the exact type of development that they want and benefit and follow others. It's not just what we as East Devon do, which we have done very well. We need to look at the wider pictures of what other communities have done and how they've achieved some of their fabulous things throughout the county, you know, of what they've done. So I fully support that. But that was just my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Howe. Other than Councillor Parr, every councillor on committee has now spoken. So for good order, I'm going to propose the recommendations as written and then come to Councillor Bailey for some wording of her amendment, please. You are Councillor Bailey, Councillor Bailey.
I get confused with the other Councillor Bailey.
I did also say her amendment.
Okay. So I was going to make a recommendation that the committee recommends the development of a grant scheme to provide financial support for the development of neighbourhood plans and requests a report is brought back to the next strategic planning committee. And the second one is something like the committee recommends to the finance portfolio holder, that an appropriate budgetary provision is made for the new grant scheme for the budget 26-27.
Could you say that again, please? Slightly slower.
The committee recommends the development of a grant scheme to provide financial support for the development of neighbourhood plans and requests a report back to the next strategic planning committee but I know that's not till March. The second point being, a second recommendation being, the committee recommends to the finance portfolio holder, and I'm not sure whether that's the right way to do it, that an appropriate budgetary provision is made for the new grant scheme. Sorry.
I can't even remember how fast I want. Right, if you've got it, that's fine. Carry on.
That an appropriate budgetary provision is made for the new grant scheme for the financial year 26-27. Yeah.
So those two proposals are proposed additions to the three recommendations that I've already proposed. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Bailey's amendment? Councillor Bailey, okay. So Bailey, there we go, the dream team. So I'm going to open the floor again now. If you have a comment, it needs to be on the two additional amendments that have been proposed, please, not on anything else. Councillor Blakey.
Thank you, Chair. It's a small amendment to the addendum, if I may. Sorry. It's only the addition of a couple of words, because I think that one of the things we should be considering as part of this is, if taking into account what Councillor Young has said about the lack of funds within East Devon, could we use the wording grant or loan scheme? Where grant is used, could a fixed term loan be offered to those smaller parishes? It would mean that they would have to adjust their council taxes or find the funds from whatever other means they can. But if EDDC is not in a position to fund the extra, would a loan repayable over a shortish period be a sensible way to do it? So that is my suggestion, is that we do look at that as being a potential way forward.
I think I know what Jess is going to say, but Councillor Bailey.
Thank you to Councillor Blakey, but knowing as I do the way smaller parishes work, loans, it's just overcomplicated and it's not going to work, because it'll be too much paperwork, too complex, and the figures that we're talking about for East Devon are really comparatively small, and I just think it's just, I think we either do the loan or, I'm at it, either do the grant, or just don't overcomplicate it with loans. Thank you.
Do you want to press the issue, Councillor Blakey? Please say no.
Yes, no. No, I won't.
Thank you, Councillor Blakey. Good answer.
I won't push it.
Councillor Ingham.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say, if you took out that loan, you'd be then paying it back to a different authority once we're being dissolved. So I'm not sure if most council taxpayers would approve of that level of accountability. I do say my opinion is, I'm afraid that those three recommendations put forward by the officers are clear, and I don't think we should expand on those. I'm sorry. This is not a good time, as we're going into the end of our final term as a district council, to start cluttering up how we enable the neighbourhood plans. I believe that what the officers have done and put forward is correct.
Thank you, Councillor Ingham. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. I would like to say that I do support this addendum amendment extra recommendation. I don't envisage this involving an awful lot of money. I also agree we shouldn't overcomplicate it with extra loans. We're talking about small parishes that are most likely to benefit, for whom, you know, putting up the precept, they're already putting up their precepts because of the looming LGR. They may have already committed, or have at least may have already got consultations on how to spend their current SIL funding. And so we're talking about, over the next couple of years, having a small pot of money available in the instance that neighbourhood plans or revisions might be held up, or, you know, site allocations potentially may be held up because an amount of money, which to this council is a very small amount, is not available to the parish at that time. So I agree with the recommendation. I don't think we should be overthinking this or overcomplicating it. Thank you.
Do any other members wish to speak on this? Councillor Davey.
Quick question. Can councils use SIL funding for plan preparation? Yes.
Parish councils
Thank you, Chair.
Can the district council?
I was thinking of parishes and
Yeah, as we said in the report, the neighbourhood proportion we think can, and other places have been, at least to some extent. I think it's slightly different when it comes to our SIL pot, in that's for strategic infrastructure. So I don't think we can, but I think there's a lot more flexibility in how the neighbourhood proportion is used.
So just before we go to a vote, just to pick up on a procedural point with the second proposed amendment, does that need to be that committee recommends to Cabinet rather than the portfolio holder? Just thinking about our reporting lines and who makes the decisions. Ed says he would have thought so. Are you happy for it to be to... It would be consistent, yeah. Are you happy for it to be to Cabinet rather than portfolio holder? Okay, thank you.
Can you amend your comment and then read them out again?
Yes. Yes, boss. Yes, I can. Okay, does anybody else wish to speak on the proposed amendments before we take a vote on them, please? Councillor Young.
Yeah, just for clarity, if it's going to Cabinet, would I be able to vote on this? Because I'll be predetermined.
I mean, you wouldn't be the only one, Jeff. I don't think so. We've never been precluded from voting on stuff at Cabinet that has been considered at SPC before. I don't see any reason why we would be.
Effectively looking at the same report, you're not being asked to do anything different, are you? So it's just being passed from yourselves where you've made a view at this committee to then being asked to look at it again at the other committee.
So Mr. Hunt doesn't think so.
I don't think so.
is
I mean, obviously, ultimately, it's up to whoever's giving the legal advice at that cabinet, but I don't think there'll be an issue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hunter. Okay, I see no further hands, so just for everybody's absolute clarity, the text of the two proposed additions to the recommendations in front of us is as follows. So proposed additional recommendation 4, that committee recommends the development of a grant scheme to provide financial support for the development of neighbourhood plans and requests a report back to the next strategic planning committee. And proposed additional recommendation 5, committee recommends to Cabinet that an appropriate budgetary provision is made for the new grant scheme for the financial year 26-27. Is everybody clear that we're voting to add those to the recommendations that I proposed earlier? Okay, in which case then can I ask all those in favour of that proposed amendment, please? I count 8. Those against? I count 1, and those abstaining, please. That's 2. Councillor Parr. Okay, so that is carried, which brings us then back to the substantive amendments, which now include those 2, which we've just voted to add. Can I ask if we can just go straight to a vote on those? Any problems with that? Okay, in which case then all those in favour of all 5 recommendations, please. I count 10. Those against and those abstaining. 1. Okay, those recommendations are carried then. Thank you, members. We have been going for 90 minutes, so I'm going to suggest that we take a 5-minute comfort break. So could we have everybody back here, please, by 11:38 at the latest? Okay, thank you, members. I allowed you 4 more minutes than I had stipulated because I'm feeling generous this morning. Yes, it's your belated Christmas present from me. There we go. Okay, agenda item 8 then, please. The Employment Land Review 24-25. Mr. Freeman, another 300-page paper for us.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the latest in a series of annual monitoring reports on employment land provision in the district. So hopefully long-standing members of the committee will be familiar with the structure and form of these reports. Like the housing ones, we try and bring them through on an annual basis so that we've got accurate monitoring data of provision, particularly in relation to focusing on sites where consent's been granted or there's extant consent within the monitoring year, and consider issues around supply of employment land across the district. This is focusing on traditional employment uses, so those traditional B-class uses that members might be familiar with, so B2 being general industrial, B8 storage and distribution. We've obviously now got the new E use class that was introduced by the government, which gives a broader range of employment uses, so we've stuck to what was effectively the B1 uses around offices, research and development facilities, which is now class E brackets G, for those keen watchers of the use classes order. And obviously we also include sui generis uses that don't fall into those categories but are significant employment generating uses. But we haven't included the wider E class uses because that takes in all sorts of things from gyms to sports clubs and other things that aren't traditional employment uses. And looking at sort of the larger sites, so those in excess of 0.1 hectares in site area. So over the year, 16 employment developments were completed, amounting to an additional 5.76 hectares of employment land. So that's more than was delivered in the previous year, but still relatively low compared to a number of the previous years that we had, albeit it can be significantly swayed by an individual development of large scale. For example, obviously the Lidl distribution centre, obviously as a one-off, massively increased provision in that particular year that we won't probably ever see again. And there's a total of 3.81 hectares that's under construction and a further 50 hectares that's consented, or just under 50 hectares, but not commenced. So there's quite a substantial amount of employment land that's in the pipeline, as it were, and then there's also what's allocated in the new local plan, which also provides quite substantial supply for the future. So this all helps to deal with known latent demand in terms of employment space and future demand that's coming forward through the evidence that was produced through the Economic Development Needs Assessment and further work associated with that. We're also, as you'll be aware, through local plan delivering more than is identified through that process, which is around trying to deliver increased self-containment in the existing towns, achieve high levels of self-containment within Malcolm Newtown, as well as bringing forward mixed-use developments within lots of those locations to help to try and deliver those sites, because there are issues in terms of the basic economics of delivering employment spaces in the district, where in many cases the costs of delivering the infrastructure and the cost of construction of employment spaces versus the future returns means it's not as economically attractive as we might like to deliver employment spaces in much of the district, particularly outside of the West End, where the economics of the Exeter market helps to boost the economics of that and boost supply. I wasn't going to go through in detail the report, as the chair identifies about 300 pages of it, and obviously looking at individual sites probably isn't for the role of the committee, so I'll just draw out those main headlines. There are a couple of issues with the details that have been brought to my attention I just wanted to touch on. One was that on page 157 in the main monitoring report, there's a reference to outline consent having been granted for development at Harepath Road, Seaton, and the planning application 22/2781/MOUT. Just to clarify, there is a resolution to approve subject to a Section 106 agreement, but the decision has not yet been issued. So there is a need to clarify that in the final version of the report. It was also brought to my attention at briefing that there's a site at Newcourt Barton on Clist Road, Clist St Mary, which is an employment site which is not included within this work. I think that's a result of the unusual way in which that site came forward and retrospective consent being granted some years ago. And while there's been some additions since then, they've not as yet had consent. So there are issues outstanding there that are being resolved. You'll see that Appendix 1F of the report, there's a growing list of sites and issues to be investigated in terms of the next iteration of this report. So I'd recommend that we add that particular site to that list of sites to be considered in a future monitoring report. There are also some issues that Councillor Young mentioned to me at the start of the meeting as well around some of the boundaries that are drawn in terms of sites within his patch. So I wondered if a general resolution might be to give delegated authority to add to the list of issues identified in Appendix 1F. And if members have further detailed issues they wish to draw attention to, if they wish to email me, then perhaps a resolution that gives delegated authority in consultation with the chair to add to that list of issues, and we can pick those up in the next iteration of the report. But quite keen to get this version published as evidence-based for the local plan. These are more minor issues that we can pick up in the next iteration of the report. So the recommendation as things stand is that the Strategic Planning Committee note the information set out in the Employment Land Review 24-25 and agree for it to be published on the Council's website. Given what I've just said, I would ask that there's an additional recommendation that delegated authority be given to myself in consultation with the chair to add to the list of additional sites and future issues in Appendix 1F of the report to include future monitoring of Newcourt Barton, Clist Road, Clist St Mary and other sites as to be determined under those delegated powers. So subject to that recommendation, I'll hand over to Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Freeman, questions, please. I'm going to come to Councillor Young first while he remembers that I said questions.
The question is, there are many farms that have diversified quite correctly with applying for planning permission for industrial uses on their farms. Have we covered those in the report? Because it becomes a bit of a fudge sometimes of, now, is it agricultural or is it industrial? Then an issue that came up some years ago, we introduced the villages plan, which had Hill Barton and Greendale as important industrial sites or employment sites. How much weight is that villages plan going to have on planning applications in the view that we're having a new local plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. How can this be particularly accurate when so many places are missing from the list? I can identify about at least 5 places in Ottery Parish that are not included on the list. We've got nothing over in the dark side, Upton Pine, and I know there's places out there, quite substantial. Another question, what is the situation with places like Rockbeer Hill Quarry and, was it Black Hill Quarry, Woodbury Common, which are not included on the list, but they are most definitely seem to be having employment taking place on them, despite the fact they're supposed to be getting restored to the original landscape after the quarry is finished. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions? Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I mean, I noticed reading the report that loss of employment land doesn't always necessarily mean loss of employment, does it? Unless it's for housing, obviously. But if a change of use takes place from a warehouse to a gym, it's no longer counted as employment land, I think you said. But it's obviously still employing people. And what interests me is not so much employment land, but what kind of jobs do we have, and what are the average sort of earnings from those? Do we get any separate information about actual employment and how people are employed, and kind of an idea of kind of salary ranges? Because I know one of our ambitions is always to try and improve the sort of earning capacity of people within the area, and aiming to foster those high-tech jobs which often are better paid. And I read an interesting article the other day about warehousing jobs which often tend to be 0 hours, minimal payment, the kind of basic wage. So do we get any separate information on actual jobs rather than just employment land? But, comprehensive though the report is, well, I thought so, but Councillor Faithful has pointed out a few inconsistencies.
You're asking for an even longer report, Ollie. Mr. Freeman.
Be careful what you wish for. Yeah, so if I come back to Councillor Young's point, which I think runs through a lot of this in terms of agricultural diversification, and I think this is one of the reasons the Newcourt Barton site that I mentioned was missed, is that it came through as an agricultural diversification. It was farm buildings that were converted, and then it's gradually grown from there. And I think it's picking up at what point the site grows to a point where it meets our threshold and should be included in this work. And I think in the meantime, the threshold of what we've been monitoring has been dropping. I think this work started off at quite a high level, looking at the large strategic employment sites, and we've gradually tried to drill down into more detail, realising that we've got a number of these smaller employment sites in rural areas that are playing a significant role in adding to our base of employment land, and we weren't picking up on that. And I think effectively some of these sites, it's hard to necessarily pick up from a desk-based exercise when they go from being a small-scale agricultural diversification to turning into a business park or some kind of employment space of substance that needs to be included in this work. And this is where members' local knowledge may help us in terms of adding to that base and future sites that we should be monitoring. So quite keen if there are sites that are missing. I think Councillor Faithful also mentioned Rock Beer Quarry, which now he mentions it, I think is another one we've identified is missing from this as well. So they're good points, and happy to take those forward. As I say, if members agree to the delegated authority, we can add those into the list of sites to be looked at in future, so they're noted in this report and then pick them up in the monitoring next time. So we look at that in more detail and pick that up. But that's, I think, where they're being missed is because of that shift. It's not necessarily clear at what point it falls within the scope of this work. In terms of the villages plan, well, as you said, Councillor Young, it's being superseded by the new local plan. So alongside the current local plan, it's fundamentally out of date, and it carries weight in decision making, but that has to be limited by the fact that it's out of weight, and we're obviously giving increasing weight to the new local plan as that comes forward, which will ultimately supersede it at the point of adoption. So it's kind of being faded out as we fade in the new local plan. In terms of Councillor Faithful's comments, yeah, as I say, I acknowledge there are some sites that have been missed for the reasons, as I've said. If you want to email me a list of those sites, to say, if members give me the delegated authority I've asked for, we can add those into the appendix, and we can make sure those are picked up in future. But I don't think it undermines, the legitimacy of this work as an evidence base for where we are in terms of local plan work, because they're relatively small sites that make a contribution and should be acknowledged, but I don't think it fundamentally changes the outcome of the work. Coming to Councillor Davies' points, yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point that employment land loss doesn't necessarily mean loss of jobs. In fact, if you look at the report, the biggest loss of employment land in terms of a single loss was a site at Hillbarton Business Park, which went into an E-class use that's a gym or sports facility, but the number of jobs that were provided in that were the same as the number of jobs that were lost from the last business that occupied the premises that had been vacant for some time and marketed before we'd accepted it going to a different use. So it didn't actually lead to a loss of jobs. Arguably, it lost a loss of potential jobs in that there could have been more people employed in that space had it been put to different use, but having established there wasn't demand for an alternative use, we kind of had to accept the position. So it is more complex than just looking at the employment land, and I would acknowledge that. But equally, we're producing it for a planning purpose, and the control we have as a planning authority is over the land and its use, hence why we focus on that. I have had discussions with our economic development team in the past about looking at information we have about jobs and how we can relate this to that jobs data, but part of the difficulty is the jobs data is about the people that live in East Devon, not necessarily the jobs that are based in East Devon. So you end up pulling in data from people that actually might work in Exeter or in Somerset or commute out of the district, which then skews the data because it's not actually about the jobs in East Devon. And there is no data set that tells us about just the jobs in East Devon. It's the census data that's telling us about the people that live here, whether they work here or not. And equally wouldn't pick up people like me that commute into the district. So it's a bit more complex, unfortunately, to pull together that information. We have made a stab at it in a past iteration of this, I recall, probably about 5 years ago, but I don't think it was really statistically very applicable because of those issues. So I'm reluctant to sort of try and do that with the data that we've got. But one thing I would say is a word of sort of reassurance in terms of the strategy we've been trying to promote, as you rightly say, was about, particularly in the growth points, or the enterprise zones now, is about trying to close this gap between wages and house prices by encouraging roles to come in that are sort of higher skilled, higher paid. I mean, the evidence does suggest that that strategy is working. The affordability ratio is dropping. I think a couple of years ago we were up to something like salaries were house prices, something like 10 times average salaries. It's down to about 8.5 now, I think, off the top of my head, which has, because that feeds into the standard method, has actually reduced our housing requirements from what it would otherwise be. It's still gone up overall because of the other issues in terms of government policy, but it's not gone up as much as it would otherwise have done because of that affordability ratio improving. So that does suggest that we're in an improving position in terms of that relationship between salaries and house prices, which can only be a good thing. I'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Councillor Faithful.
Can I come back with this Rockby Hill quarry thing? Because Rockby Hill, when they started quarrying it, the condition was, this was explained to me by the quarry manager when I was doing it for a geography project quite some years ago, that they had to restore the landscape of the hill after they finished quarrying it. And now we've got Keylink, is it, Devon County Council, Southwest Highways, and the latest one is we've got a Amazon distribution depot on that site. And it's like, are they supposed to be doing this? Why are we having this as all this employment when they're supposed to be restoring the landscape?
So I don't think that's really a question for us to pick up during the meeting, Peter, because that's quite specifically about one individual site, and it's not really going to the substance of the report that's in front of us. But I'm sure Mr. Freeman can pick that up with the team and come back to you separately about that. Are there any further questions about the report? Councillor Blakey.
Thank you, Chair. In the last year, of the delivered floor space, the additional floor space created, has any of that been in properties, buildings, areas owned by East Devon District Council? I think I know the answer, but
I don't know is an answer.
I don't know for certain without trawling through because the answer will be in there in the sense that if I checked it against records of sites that we own, but as far as I'm aware, no, is the answer.
Okay. Question? Just in at the death.
Yes, it is a question. Page 20 of the report, 7.3, Exeter Science Park has 13 empty units, which account for, off the top of my head, about 10% of all empty units across East Devon. Is there, can you explain why this is, why there seems to be such a high level of empty units?
I also don't think that's necessarily a question for today, and I doubt it's one that Ed has the answer to. No, Ed says he doesn't have the answer. That's perhaps a question for either the economy or the finance portfolio holders, or indeed Mr. Wood, who sits on their board. Go on.
2.7, is that referring to individual units rather than, because it's saying 0.01, is that referring to unit size, or because it's the wrong number if it's for the actual site, but if it's for units, and it says 0.1 and whatever the figure is for the buildings, 2.7. Have you got the point in the wrong place, or are you talking about a different size of whatever?
Sorry, you mean it should be 0.1 hectares rather than 0.01? No, 0.01
hectares is 100 square metres. Yeah. I'm confused. What's the question? Yeah, looking at 2.7. Cut-off threshold that is typically...
Minimum site on the report, yeah, 0.1 of a hectare.
0.01.
So is that referring to a building?
It says it refers to, that figure refers to site. The next figure, 50 metre squared floor space, refers to buildings.
So that is a single building or an overall site, because otherwise the point's in the wrong place. It's 0.1. So in normal numbers, quarter of an acre is the 0.1 of a hectare. But what you've got there is
0.01 hectares is 100 square metres. I have just Googled it. The conversion is correct. The point's in the right place.
100 square metres is 10 metres by 10 metres.
Yes.
So that's what we're talking. So we're talking about units, individual units, rather than the overall site.
A site can be measured in hectares.
That would be a small site. But
It would be a small site, but it would still be a site.
On the report is a quarter of an acre or 0.1 of a hectare.
That is what it says.
This is referring to buildings. This 2.7, is that referring to buildings? Because it's not referring
It has a figure for both, Peter. If you read the rest of the sentence, the 0.01 hectares or greater in size applies to sites. It says only include sites that are 0.01 hectares, 100 metres squared or greater in size, and buildings which are 50 metres squared floor space or greater in size. I'm going to move us on. I'm going to move the recommendations that are the recommendation that is set out in the report, with the addition of delegated authority for the Assistant Director of Planning, Strategy and Development Services in consultation with the Chair to add additional sites to Appendix, what was it, Appendix F of the report, Mr. Freeman? Appendix 1F of the report, and encourage members to send in anything that they think should be picked up in future versions of the report, please. Does anybody want to talk further about those recommendations? No? Okay, in which case then, all those in favour, please. I think that's unanimous. So that's clearly carried. Thank you, members. Which brings us then to agenda item 9, proposed response to consultation on the evolving local plan for Torbay. Mr. Freeman, shall we upset some of our neighbours?
Well, not really neighbours, are they? Well, thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is to make members aware of Torbay's Council's Regulation 18 draft local plan consultation, which is out at the moment. Members will recall that Torbay have in the past indicated that they would not be able to meet their current housing need and would be looking for authorities within the Exeter housing market area, which includes East Devon, to help them to address that issue. We wouldn't usually otherwise have brought a plan for an authority that isn't a direct neighbour through to you, but because of that position, it becomes relevant for us to comment on their plans, as we have done in the past. And long-standing members of the committee may recall we've commented previously on work that they've been doing in relation to this, and made similar points to what we're proposing to make in terms of this report, because fundamentally they have an identified housing need through the standard method of 950 dwellings per year. They are proposing to meet less than half of that, in fact 42% of it, because there's reference in their plan to 400 homes per year at least to be delivered, leaving quite a substantial shortfall. And no real indications about how that should be dealt with, other than that it should be accommodated elsewhere in Devon. So I would suggest we've not had further detailed conversations with them or seen detailed evidence to back up their assumptions in relation to that. And obviously we question whether or not that is a legitimate approach to address their need. I think previously at meetings you'll be aware that Teambridge included some wording in their local plan when it went through examination about this issue, about leaving it open for plan review in the event that neighbouring authorities couldn't meet their housing need, and obviously they are a neighbouring authority of Torbay. We felt it prudent, and you might recall we've included similar wording in our proposed local plan to cover our position in terms of that, because the duty to cooperate requires us to have regard to neighbouring authorities. In this case, Torbay isn't a neighbour of ours, and we would strongly make the argument that meeting Torbay's need within East Devon is fraught with difficulties in itself, in that the geographical location of East Devon in relation to Torbay makes that challenging to see how additional housing here would meet that need. Not to mention differences in house prices and demand. If someone has a need to live in Torbay, how is additional housing in East Devon going to meet that need? So we have some fundamental concerns in relation to that. These feed into sort of the comments that we're feeding back in terms of this, which are very similar to comments we've made in a previous response to work that they were doing about how Torbay should be perhaps more proactive in looking at how it can meet its need within its own boundaries. Should it potentially be a case where they're simply saying to government they can't meet the need that's identified because of the issues that they highlight. So I won't go through the comments in detail. They're there in the report, but the proposal is that we make those comments robustly back to Torbay in terms of their consultation on their plan, and ask them to take those into account. So I think the exact wording of the recommendation is that Strategic Planning Committee agree that this council respond to the Torbay local plan consultation using the text set out in this committee report, advising about concerns around their current policy position in respect of housing provision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. First question from me. Are any authorities that actually neighbour Torbay responding along the same lines? Do we know?
I don't know what responses they will be sending. I know we're not alone in having the concerns that we have. I think there are some challenges in terms of the point at which neighbouring authorities are in the plan making process. Obviously, Teambridge, have in the final stages sort of adopting their plan. I think their other neighbouring authorities have plans that were adopted only a couple of years ago. So this is part of the issue of them looking kind of beyond neighbouring authorities for help with this, because of where the neighbouring authorities are in the plan making process. But that doesn't overcome the issues that we're raising, I don't think, and others I would imagine will raise, who are authorities within the Exeter housing market area but not adjoining Torbay. I wouldn't be surprised if similar comments were made, but I don't know for sure what response they will be making.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Further questions? Councillors Davey, then Jess Bailey, then Brian Bailey.
From reading the report on page 297 at point B, it appears to suggest Torbay hasn't even done a call for sites. And if not, would an inspector accept a plan that had been put forward without even attempting to find out if there are available sites in the area? Or is it simply they've done a call for sites and it's not come up with sufficient for the amount of development that the government requires of them?
Councillor Jess Bailey.
Thank you. I don't disagree with the text of the recommended by officers, but I wonder if it's sufficiently robust, because I mean, we can hardly meet our own targets, let alone trying to meet some other authority that's miles away. So I know we have a duty to cooperate, but I wonder whether we should be a bit more blunt.
Should we sign it off with bog off? Councillor Brian Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I find myself agreeing totally with Councillor Jess Bailey. I think this is a very...
Just to remind members, we are in questions still.
May I express an opinion on this?
You may express a question, Councillor Bailey.
Well, my question is, as mentioned by my colleague, we are, I wouldn't say we're struggling, but we're having difficulty in getting our numbers correct, our numbers up. So why on earth would we want to take someone else's numbers when they appear not to have bothered? This appears to me to be an excellent case of buck passing. And if it works for them, why doesn't it work for us? Why don't we say to North Devon, here, you take our housing allocation, we don't want them. Solve a hell of a lot of problems. Mr. Freeman would sleep better at night. Thank you, Chair.
The answer to your question is we wouldn't want to, Brian, but there's a duty to cooperate, so we have to at least listen to them. Mr. Freeman, are there any other answers you wanted to give to... I think there was one question that I detected.
Yeah, so there was a question from Councillor Davey. I mean, they, as I understand it, they have done a call for sites, and nowhere near enough sites came forward. I think what we're saying in point B in the response is that, particularly because Torbay is quite a small geographical area, that if through their own work they're identifying sites that perhaps haven't been put forward in a call for sites, but are appropriate sites that they might support for development, that perhaps they should take a more proactive approach and approach the landowners and sort of say, would you be willing to bring that site forward? Can we help to support it coming forward in some way, to be a bit more proactive than just a call for sites and response, which, to some extent we might have liked to have done, but such a large geographical area is just not feasible. But Torbay is a much, much smaller geographical area, so it feels like perhaps a more proactive approach like that could be achievable, particularly given how far short of their housing need they're proposing to go in terms of their delivery. I would say, as much as I agree with the kind of pushing back against Torbay's need coming to East Devon, I do have some sympathy for the issues that they're experiencing given such a small geographical area and the environmental constraints that they have. And I think Torbay Council probably deserves some credit in terms of what they are doing, in terms of, I'm aware that they are proactively buying up sort of former hotel and B&B sites and things, and redeveloping them for housing purposes themselves as their own proactive response to some of these issues. So it's not like they're not doing anything to address the issue. They are trying to be proactive and deliver housing sites and regenerate rundown old hotels that they have within their patch themselves. But that's tip of the iceberg in terms of the numbers that they really need to deliver, and I think they would acknowledge that. So I don't think that changes our response, but just for balance, I think it's important to say that they are taking measures to try and address this issue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Councillor Bailey, is it an actual question this time? Okay, Councillor Bailey.
Question to our well-known solicitor, Damien, and ask him, are we legally obliged to go along with this awful idea? Thank you very much.
Yes, we have to provide comment as set out in the report. We don't have to agree with what they want, but that's why Mr. Freeman's drafted the report to give our comments.
I think the issue here, Councillor Bailey, in terms of the report, is our response to their consultation. They're not asking us to take housing at this point in time. What they're asking for is a response to their local plan consultation, which is what we're proposing. In terms of the duty to cooperate, there's a legal requirement to comply with the duty to cooperate, but it's not a duty to agree. So we don't have to agree with them, but we do have to have regard to what they're saying and communicate with them on these issues. And this is part of that process. But I think the issue is the response, a suitably robust and accurate response to send back in response to their consultation.
I'm going to move us to debate, and I'm going to propose the recommendation that's set out in the report from the chair. Does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Young, and then Councillor Howe. Oh no? You changed your mind?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Having worked in Torbay for many years, I know it well. I know most of the rat runs and where all the queuing traffic is, etc. They have a tremendous challenge on their hands to find appropriate sites for building. It's as Ed Freeman has said, no, it's very restrained already, the boundary. There are already substantial communities on the boundary, just within South Hams and just within Timbridge. And that they are almost on top of each other. So I've got a lot of sympathies for Torbay, and when I saw what the housing number was going to be, I was very surprised at that number. So I've got a lot of sympathy for them, but we also have our own problems with finding the housing numbers here. So no, the response I think is appropriate, and no, I would be supporting this. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to say that they agree with the recommendation? I'm going to take us to a vote then, please, members. All those in favour of the recommendation as set out in the report, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Agenda item 10, the infrastructure funding statement. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. So, again, this is a regular item that comes through every year. We have to publish an infrastructure funding statement which sets out monies that we've received and spent in terms of SIL and Section 106 monies across the year. And so this is the latest iteration of that report. It follows the same template and form as last year's report, which members may recall was a new approach to this in terms of trying to make it more engaging and interesting as a document through the use of sort of publishing software to liven it up. Their headlines really are in terms of the reporting year is 8 Section 106 agreements were signed, securing just under £5 million in financial contributions and 415 affordable dwellings. A total of 1.622 million was collected in financial contributions, and £734,000 was spent on community infrastructure. Obviously, the current position is a number of spend decisions were made, and those are currently being progressed through funding agreements to take those forward. 2 of those have been completed in respect of Exmouth Rugby Club and Pinhost Surgery. Others are being progressed to take those forward. But that's essentially the current position, and that's what's set out in the report and the funding statement. I would say the funding statement should have been published before the end of 2025, so apologies for the delay here. There was a last-minute issue when it was going to go on to the last agenda, whereby finance identified an error in some of the figures, which then delayed it. But I'm not aware of any penalty for publishing a few days late, other than I'd get a reminder, I think, by the end of the month if it wasn't up by then. So hopefully if members are happy, we can get it published as soon as possible and fulfil that obligation of the legislation. So the recommendation is that the committee note the contents of the report and the requirement to provide an annual infrastructure funding statement, and that members approve the publication and submission of it to government based on the information detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Questions, please, Councillors Howe, Jess Bailey and Faithful.
I'll start with the obvious one. On the summary of neighbourhood SIL, I'm wondering why one of my parishes isn't listed at all. Bishop's Clist or Clist St Mary. And they've got sizable SIL funds sitting around.
Had you not heard, Councillor Howe? We decided to abolish Clist St Mary, I'm afraid. Councillor Jess Bailey, is it the same thing?
Similarly, Aylesbury is not on here.
Councillor Faithful, your question.
So when do spending get put onto the reports? Are they when they start a project or when they finish the project? Because I think we've got a project in Ottery which I believe is using SIL funding as part of it, which has just started. Will that be in this year's report, or will it be in the next report when it's finished? Do you know?
So the reports for the financial year to the end, so the 24-25 financial year. So anything that's come forward since then will go into next year's infrastructure funding statement. As to why Aylesbury and Clist St Mary are not on here, my initial response was going to be that I assume they hadn't received or spent anything in the year, but then there are parishes on here that applies to, but we've still got them listed with a remaining amount. So we're saying that Aylesbury and Clist St Mary have outstanding SIL amounts that are not on here.
They're not on here at all.
No, but have they received anything, either in the year, spent anything in the year, or have anything outstanding?
I'm
Was it
pretty
just
sure
that they never
Aylesbury
received
has.
anything? Okay.
I find it hard to believe Clist St Mary hasn't. But either way, you've got Stockland here with no receipts, no zeros all the way across. So either we're listing them all or we're not.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I don't know why they've been missed. If members are happy to agree, subject to delegated authority to myself in consultation with the chair, I can get those added in and make sure that any others that are missed are identified and added in as well. And apologies for the error.
Can I just ask another question? So I think we publish them on our website and we submit them, don't we, to government? What does government do with it? Do they publish it somewhere, or do they ever ask any questions, or do they ever come back to you and say, what about this or what about that? Do we ever hear anything from them?
I've never heard anything from them in response to it. I think the only thing I heard one year was someone asking whether or not we'd posted it or not. I responded and we had, but I've not had any comeback in terms of the information or anything. Well, it's published on our website, so they just pick it up from there. I don't think they publish it anywhere else. It's just on our website.
Any further questions? No? Okay, in which case then I will propose the recommendations as written from the chair, save to amend recommendation 2 to add on the end with delegated authority for the Assistant Director, Planning Strategy and Development Services in consultation with the chair to make any amendments needed to pick up missing information.
Superb.
Everybody clear what we are voting on? Councillor Jess Bailey?
I think we should specifically name those parishes and any other.
There might be others.
I know, but I think we should say Aylesbury,
To pick up missing information regarding Aylesbury,
Mary, and
Cliss
any
and
other.
Mary, and any others that are identified. Happy? Okay, all those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. That brings us to the end of our January meeting. See you in March.